Hello, I'm Kasia Avery. Today we're starting our mixed media course, and if you ever looked at a piece of mixed media art or a journal and you thought, wow, how did they even do that? You're in the right place. We're going to break it down. First, let's start with what really is mixed media. Simply put, it's combining two or more materials in one artwork. So paint, collage, inks, mark making, stamping. There is so much to mixed media, but we're going to make it simple and start with collage.
In mixed media, we can use all sorts of different substrates. You can work on a canvas board, wooden board. You can work in little boxes and turn them into beautiful mixed media treasures. You can work with sculpture, and of course you can work on paper. And this is my favorite substrate because it's so easy to get, so easy to set up, always available, and comes in different forms, sizes, and it just gives us so many opportunities easily. We will be working in a book. You can work on paper using a paper pad, so you get each single sheet, you can pull it out, work on it, and move on to the next one. Or you can work in a book. And to me, having a book for a project, so like here for a course or for a certain stage of my learning or for telling a certain story, is a fantastic idea because I get to keep all of this artwork in one place, and it's easy to see my progress, refer back to, and also allows me to feel like this is more mine because I can close it once I finish, I can put it in a drawer. There's no added pressure of it having to go on a wall or being stored anywhere in a certain way. This is in a book, so it's kind of, I feel it's freeing. So that's why it's going to be a book. And I really recommend that if you're starting out, you also work in a book. Now, when it comes to books, there's different kinds and sizes. First of all, size. If you feel a little bit apprehensive about this whole process and you don't know if you got the courage yet to, really express yourself freely, I would recommend that you start with something smaller. So something like this, like a notebook kind of size, that would be perfect because maybe a smaller page won't feel as daunting. If you feel like you want to really, kind of loosen up and spread your wings and, you have this bit of confidence, then go for something larger like what I have. So an A4 kind of letter size book would be fantastic because you get to play with all the techniques and maybe create slightly larger pieces, which could be really, really exciting. So that's what I'm going to be working for. Also because for demoing techniques, it's nicer to have a larger substrate. Now let's move on to what's inside the book because that's really important. So the paper that you need for working with all of these mixed media techniques that I'm going to be presenting to you needs to be sort of thickish. That's a very professional term. Different manufacturers will call their different thicknesses of papers different names, and it can get very confusing very quickly. So if you're starting out, I would recommend that you don't pay any attention to what the paper is called. The only thing you need to pay attention to is its thickness, which every sketchbook, notebook, acrylic book will have indicated on the cover, or at least in the description. So this one that I'm working on is 200 grams per square meter. And that's a fantastic thickness for what we're going to be doing. It's not too thick and not too thin. It's going to take most of our techniques and supplies, but it's also not too thick, so you can have plenty of paper in your book, and it's really nice and tactile to work on. And as a rule of thumb, I would say for mixed media, when you're using all sorts of different supplies, 160 grams per square meter is the minimum you should look for. Now there are ways how you can work with thinner paper, and I will talk about it because that's really exciting. But if you want a good all-rounder, then something around 200 grams per square meter is ideal. You can have 250 grams per square meter, and that's fine. But, somewhere in that area, 160, 250, and you're going to be really happy with that book. I have linked to this book in the description of this video because I really like it. It's got a nice, neat cover, and the paper feels really good, and I think it's good value as well. And this one's called Sketchbook. While we're going to be working with mixed media, just because it's Sketchbook doesn't mean branded as Sketchbook, doesn't mean it's not going to work for us. So grams per square meter is really important. The other thing is obviously the binding. This is ring bound and I like that because you get to open it and it lays flat. You can get them stitched and that will be your personal preference. All you need is good paper. Let's start learning some mixed media techniques and we will begin with collage. And collage is a huge, beautiful world of opportunities. What we will be focusing on is non-dimensional collage, collage that can be easily contained in a book, but there is also dimensional collage, so 3D elements, putting those together, and that's super exciting, and I will talk about it at the end of this course. Right now, let's focus on the basics. So, flat elements like paper, fabric and tapes, stickers, all of these are perfect for our collage. And collage will provide you the bones of your art. It will be the first starting point, and sometimes it will be all you want to do because it's fascinating and fun, and so there's so many opportunities there. You can create beautiful mind maps and very expressive pieces of art that tell a story. So, there's a choice. First of all, let's look at the papers that you could be using for collage. Let's start with wrapping paper. I mean, this wrapping paper is amazing. And you can get beautiful designs for very little money. I have these pads of artwork that are meant to be wrapping paper. And of course, I always save any wrapping paper that gifts come wrapped in. Sometimes I'll save just a small scrap, but I choose those that I love the most. And especially if they're not shiny, that's perfect for mixed media collage. Here's some vintage wrapping paper. I mean, that's so gorgeous and beautiful, but also presents often come wrapped in tissue, and that is really good for mixed media too. Or you can buy tissues that have been printed with certain images specifically for mixed media. I'm sure many of you watching dabbled in scrapbooking in the past, or maybe are still scrapbookers. I used to do a lot of scrapbooking, so I have a lot of leftover scrapbooking papers, and as you probably know, they come in beautiful sets with patterns and images and illustrations and photographs, and they can be in all sorts of different styles. And you can get them in pads or single sheets. And it's really cool because you can get like one pad which obviously has beautifully matched colors and patterns and themes, and you can use it in your art to create like a series of artwork which will be coherent because you're using papers that are already beautifully matching. So scrapbooking papers are absolutely perfect for mixed media. But also stickers, right? Scrapbooking papers often come with stickers, strips, borders, alphabet. And these are perfect because we can, they already have glue on them, obviously, so we can quickly create something using those. Another thing that I really love is vintage papers, so pages from old books or illustrations. I mean, they are gorgeous, and sometimes you'll have a beautiful book you'll find at a car boot or a charity shop, and you won't want to use it because the illustrations are so beautiful. So a good idea then is to scan the image or the page and print a copy. So you get to keep the book and you get to use the images as well. But I really love vintage stuff in my collage and mixed media. Another kind of vintage stuff is family treasures and like actual really meaningful pieces. So this is an envelope that my mom put together for me of her little ephemera from when she has her clothing business. She used to make clothes for children, and that was in the 70s and the 80s, so everything's a little bit vintage. So I will never probably use these as they are, though maybe one day to create art about that in particular. But for mixed media that we're gonna be doing today, best idea is to scan and print it out so you get to keep the original. Another kind of paper that you could use is your own painted paper. So as you experiment with all these supplies and techniques, you will end up with a big pile of painted papers. And you don't need to throw them away. Well, you shouldn't. You can't throw them away. You should dry them and stack them and put them in a drawer that's dedicated to painted paper. Obviously, you need that drawer. And then you can tear them into smaller pieces and use them for collage. And that's so perfect because straight away you have your own signature mark on those collage pieces. And especially if for testing your paints or color palettes you use some nice vintage ledger paper, then it's going to be even more beautiful. But let's not forget, we talked about all the treasures and vintage paper and scrapbooking paper, which can also be sometimes pricey. Let's not forget about magazines, leaflets, ephemera, booklets. They are sometimes really beautifully designed, and why not make the most of it? If you're using it for your own personal art, you have absolutely the right to have fun with them. So I collect whatever I find more pretty, or if it has interesting colors, because I can always cut the word out, if it's not appropriate, but I can keep the colors or a fun image. So yeah, you need a drawer for those as well. Don't throw anything away. From now on, that's going to be your rule. And as you work on collage, you will end up with lots of small pieces of paper. I keep a bowl at my desk to collect them in, because you never know when you're going to need them. Now let's talk about attaching these papers into our book. So I'm going to open my book on my first page. Well, I am very excited about a blank page. I love a blank page. And let's start putting some of these on. Now, the easiest and simplest way to glue a piece of paper onto a page, I'm just going to tear it. The easiest way is to obviously use our glue sticks. A glue stick is perfect. Now this one has been used by my kids and it seems like they've been gluing dog hair with it. But the glue sticks are so easy and simple, and they are absolutely good enough. And we're going to put it on our paper. I'm going to go right to the edge, and you need an old credit card and you smooth it out. And that way you will not get bubbles or warps. Glue stick is just so good. So sometimes you will have a larger piece of paper that you want to glue down, and you may want to use a different sort of glue than glue stick, because glue stick may be a little bit tedious or boring to use, I don't know. And there's a faster way to glue larger pieces of paper down, and also more permanent, like they are going to stay there. But the problem with that way is that sometimes papers warp if you don't do it right, or they bubble up. And the glue I'm talking about is PVA glue. So a glue that's liquid. I have a little paper plate here, which is fantastic to have really for paints and for glues. So it's liquid and it's milky, like white when it's wet, but completely clear when it's dry. And it's quite pourable, but not too much. And this is fantastic for gluing larger pieces of paper, thicker papers, and anything that you want permanently on your paper, especially if you're planning to use watercolors or acrylics afterwards. So I'm going to show you the technique. It's simple. As soon as you kind of get the idea, you'll be able to do it, and it's easy. Right, so you need that glue somewhere, either on a palette, or you could pour it straight onto your paper that you want to glue down. And you see I'm using that scrap piece of paper underneath. Then you need that credit card, and you spread that glue as evenly as possible and as thinly as possible on your piece of paper. The less glue you have, the better, but of course you need to have it all covered in glue. So look at an angle as the light will reflect the the areas where you have that glue on and make sure it's well spread. Now I need just a little bit more. I always like to start with an edge because then I can spread it easily. And there's something really satisfying about doing this. I really like to glue large pieces of paper. Now this paper is already warping. It's really thin, so it's a good example. Right, and I'm just gonna use the corner of my card to lift that paper up. I'm gonna wipe my card straight away to clean it on a piece of paper, on a piece of rag. Okay, I'm gonna lift it up and I'm gonna show you something. You see when I hold this paper, how it curls? That's the grain of paper. So if the paper curls like that, it means that the grains go like that, right? That's how the grain is. So when we're spreading it out on our paper with our credit card, we want to go against the grain. We want to go the opposite direction as we are smoothing it out. So I'm putting it down, and I remember the grain goes like that. So I want to just make sure first of all that it's properly put down. And then I'm gonna go with my credit card in the opposite direction to the grain, smoothing it out, getting rid of all those wrinkles and bubbles. Now I have a wrinkle here, so I can lift it up a little bit. Now underneath here I had a little bit of texture from the previous paper, so it's maybe not absolutely ideal, but this is pretty good. Now it's important that your credit card is clean once you do it, not covered in glue still, because otherwise you'll be spreading that glue on your paper and you may not necessarily want it, it may not bother you, but for some techniques you want that paper clean. And now this is pretty lovely. It's very smooth. I had only one issue here, and because this is wrapping paper, gift paper, then you know, even though there is no wrinkle, there is still a mark after the wrinkle, but that's fine. This is as good as it gets, really. And this is a really satisfying process to be able to put that glue down and smooth it out and get this gorgeously smooth texture. This is fantastic. So these are two ways of gluing down your papers. For smaller pieces of paper, use a glue stick. That's perfect and good enough. For larger pieces of paper, use PVA glue and try and use the technique that I just demonstrated to make sure you don't get any bubbles and warps. So let's put some more papers down. Let's fill this page with collage using all sorts of different papers. So I have wrapping paper, I have scrapbooking paper. Let me use this page from an old book. So if you like that vintage look, an old book page is going to be perfect for you. And even though I said use a glue stick for smaller elements, of course you can use PVA glue for smaller elements too. That is my glue of choice because I just really like the process. It just gives you that sure effect, if you know what I mean. It's not gonna move around and it's really tactile. So you see the grain, it warps like that, so I'm going with my credit card in the opposite direction. You may be asking a question, where should I put my papers? Well, I will talk a little bit about composition a little bit later on as we are working on putting all of our techniques together. But I can give you one tip right away, that repetition is a fantastic tool. So when you're building a collage page, try and use the same element at least twice. Not element necessarily, but paper or color. So here I'm using these book pages and I put it in two places. especially when they're smaller elements. It's great to have them in more than one place. And 3, somehow weirdly, I don't know why, is really pleasing to the eye. Now, some people will like to place their collage elements in straight lines, so vertically or horizontally. This is what I do. That may mean something about me, may say something about me that maybe I need order in my life, but there's not wrong or right way, right? So you can put your pieces of collage paper like I do, horizontally or vertically, or you can put them at an angle, you know, a little bit more diagonally. And if you use your papers in a diagonal way, it will absolutely, definitely create more movement on your page, and it will add more of a dynamic look. You know, it's gonna be like, it's all gonna be dancing, and there's gonna be that vibrant energy. I'm not always into that energy, so I don't always do that. But yeah, it's just a matter of personal choice. We're always starting with larger pieces and then moving on to smaller ones slowly. So as you can see, I am kind of playing with layering different papers. They aren't matched necessarily well regards color. I've not planned that yet. We can plan that later. We'll be talking about color in detail. But, you know, I am using a lot of dark, some neutral colors, and that goes together. And then we have these reds and pinks, and I will probably naturally be leaning towards reds and pinks as I work, because that's just how I am. But I would really encourage you now to grab some papers. Just get yourself a little pile of papers, even if it's some cutouts from a magazine, and start putting them down. Whether you're using a glue stick or PVA glue, just have some fun with it. Now, everything that I'm talking about, all these rules, repetition, larger pieces, smaller pieces later, neutral colors, all of that, all of these are some rules. And it's really good, in my opinion, to know these rules so you can later break them. In mixed media, that's one of the greatest things about that form of art, that discipline of art, is that we get to break the rules. We get to be so adventurous, more adventurous than in any other form of art. That's what I think, at least. So don't be afraid to break the rules, and remember, everything I say is just one way of looking at it, one point of view. You can make your things your own, and I would really encourage that, because another great thing about mixed media is that it expresses, it shows a little bit who you are, where you're at in your life. It can answer a lot of questions. Right, so I have this paper with some nice handwriting. And another piece of that. You see, I've not even looked at my glue stick since I got my PVA glue with my credit card. Oh my God, just really like it. I just really like it. Right, okay. So something like that could be ready for our next steps. Could be ready for adding more color, texture, and more elements to it. Or you could now add a focal point. So an image of a face or an animal or a big word that you cut out of a magazine and call it a day. That could be your finished piece. There is a lot of art and joy in matching papers, building that composition, and then choosing what goes in the middle as your focal point. And nobody ever said that you have to be adding layers and layers and layers of paint. You can, but you don't have to. This is the first step. Collage is a fantastic technique that you will be using over and over in your mixed media. Now, you could leave it as it is and add more layers of paint and the marks in the next stages of our course, because we will be learning all of these techniques. Or you could add a focal point to it and call it a day. Have a finished piece if you like. Because nobody said you have to add more layers and more layers and more layers. Sometimes you can just stop. If you're happy with what you got, just stop, finish it off, and you can move on to the next piece. And I want to show you how to add a focal point to a collage like that. So a focal point is an image that will draw attention, that will be the center of your piece. So that could be an image of a face, of an animal, or even a large word that you cut out from a magazine that means something to you or works visually, whatever. A good idea is to have a collection of images that you take from magazines, or on our website we have these printable collage collections, which are really fun because they're themed and we love them. So that's what I did. I printed that out and I cut one lady out of it. And this works because the background's quite dark and she is quite light, so immediately if I put her in the center, she stands out, right? So she becomes a focal point straight away. Now if I would have a darker lady that I'd like to use, like this ice skater on a dark background, she kind of blends in a little bit too much. So in ideal world, I would grab a lighter piece of paper, glue it down first, and then place her on top of that, and straight away she stands out, right? She becomes an immediate focal point, and I really love that. But I want to add a little bit more to these ladies, whichever one I choose to use. So maybe butterfly wings, because obviously whimsical. Butterfly wings like these that I cut out from our collage collection would work really well with this lady, I think. Add an instant movement. We would need a little bit more of that lighter paper, but that's quite fun. But maybe I'll use this lady and I will find some different wings for her. I have some butterflies here, and I think maybe just looking at the colors of the whole page, want something that will stand out, maybe these. So they're a bit too small for her, so I'll just cut that poor butterfly in half and do it like that, and that looks pretty cool. Right, but I feel like this is a bit harsh, this straight edge. Everything's flowing and soft, and this edge is very harsh. So I'm just gonna pull a bit of it off, because I can still do that. That PVA glue is dry but not perfectly dry yet, so I can still kind of work with it. I think that helps already. I would like to get rid of that whole straight edge. That's just my personal preference. There's no right or wrong, but to me it just felt a little bit too much. Now that is much better. I have my wings again and I can glue them down. So I will do that now, and then let's make a few more collage pages, just papers, not necessarily focal points, just so we can have something to work on later and play with papers and exercise kind of matching different colors and shapes and sizes together. Now, this is a great, fun and relaxing process. So imagine putting a podcast on or some nice music in the background, and you could create so many of these and have fun with matching the colors in different shapes. Now, what I've made here is a background collage for next steps of mixed media. So we'll be able to add some marks to it and painting, right? This is a finished collage, but this is going to be a beginning. So in that case, not all of your page has to be covered with collage. Like here, we almost filled it, right? Here, a lot of paper is still showing through, and that is fine because we can fill it with other things later, and that can be very exciting too. Another thing that we can add to paper collage are fabrics. Scraps of fabrics, little pieces that are meaningful or not meaningful, will add not only color and the wonderful tactile experience, but also texture, making your piece a lot more interesting. And you can attach them with PVA glue in the same way as you would with your papers. So let me show you quickly. I have this nice strip of paper here, or maybe something larger so you get to see it as well. Let me just cut it with scissors. I love to buy it from haberdashery shops. You can get these packs of scraps, and I really love that. That's just perfect for mixed media. So as with paper, you put a line of glue, you spread it. You may need a little bit more glue for fabric than you do for paper because there's texture that you need to get into. And you push this glue down onto your fabric, a little bit more, just to make sure we have enough. And the thicker the fabric, the more glue you are going to need. But however thick your fabric is, even leather, PVA glue will be good enough for it, right? And now just lift it up. Now we don't need to worry about the grain because nothing like this is going on here. And let me just push it down here, maybe lower, and spread it out. And after a few moments, this will be touch dry. And after a few more moments, this will be ready to paint on or even write on if you have a good tool. We will talk about tools. So let's do a little bit more fabric. I have this beautiful piece that my friend dyed for me with, I think, avocado skins, which is a fantastic idea. As you can see, my papers and even my fabrics, they are layered, meaning they are overlapping. And that is really good because it creates interest. You could create your collage in more of a patchwork style where each paper joins with the other but doesn't overlap. And that could be really cool too. But what I like is that more of a layered look where different papers are overlapping. That's really, really fun. So that's fabrics. You can add lace, doily, even a crumpled up thread. And also a great thing and super easy and quick to use is some tape. So painter's tape like this. Just tear a larger piece of it if you have a big piece. I like to tear it in half to get that soft edge. And stick it on in few places. And that's so instant, so quick. You can also get washi tapes, which are like painter's tape, but they are patterned. The glue on some of those, especially if they're a lower quality, is not as strong, so you may have to use a glue stick or PVA glue, but you know, in most cases you won't need to do that. I'm just gonna put one more piece somewhere on the other side of my spread. And you see how much more detail we're getting straight away with these smaller pieces. I've started with larger ones and now we're moving to smaller. It's like, it's cool. It's getting really interesting now. And with tapes, the fun thing is that you can get so many different designs. I mean, it's a rabbit hole. Once you start browsing online, you'll never stop, and you definitely will need a drawer for your washi tapes. Oops. Another type of tape is like a dressing tape, like a plaster, but without the dressing. So you see, that's fabric, that's cotton with sticky back, and you cut it off and you glue it down. So this is like adding fabric to your art, but very quickly and instantly. And it's interesting, and it's texture, and it's another layer of something different, and that's fun. And one more type of paint is sizing tape that you'd use if you paint professionally with watercolors and you want to stretch your paper. That's what professional artists would use. I use it as just another idea for texture in my art. So this has glue on it. It's this brown tape with glue on it, but the glue is dry. So you need to spray it with some water. So I have some clean water in my spray bottle. And then this glue activates, becomes really sticky, and you just put it down wherever you think it should go. Mine should go here. That's cool. I really like that. I love that tape. It's so quick and easy to use, and it's very natural looking. I'm into that natural look. Oh my goodness, I put it diagonally, almost diagonally. Who would have thought at the beginning of this process that I'll be using my tape diagonally? It's very unlike me. But you see, that's what makes media does to people. And again, now this is becoming a really busy background. There's nothing wrong with busy. That's cool. That's really cool. Right, so this is collage. Play with it. Have fun with it. Enjoy the playfulness of it, and then we will move on to this one super important art supply that if you want to try mixed media, you just simply must have, and I will show you the multiple, various beautiful ways in which you'll use it and doors that it will unlock.